Shalom Aleichem. Yesterday, on our journey through Shas in Mishnah Yomi, we entered chapter 7 of Sanhedrin, the famous chapter Arba Mitot, the 4 methods of execution that were used in ancient times. We had a list of them in Mishnah Aleph. Now we're picking up at Mishnah Bet, Mitzvat HaNisrafin, the mitzvah of burning. Now remember, in chapter 6, we talked about skila, which is stoning, but not exactly stoning. We're about to see sreifa. Doesn't mean burning from the outside. We'll see how that works in a moment. So what do they do? Hayu mishokino to bezevel adar kuvotov. They would sink the convicted person into manure, into sticky mud, up to their knees. Now the idea is so they can't move and wiggle. V'notnin sudar kosha, they put a rough, strong handkerchief or rope, latocha raka, inside a soft one, v'korich al tzavaro, and wrap that around his neck. Ze moshech etzlo, v'ze moshech etzlo. And there's 2 other people. Well, in the Gemara they say it's the adim, the witnesses who convicted this person. They both pull part of this rope neckerchief towards themselves, ad shepatech at piv, until the convicted man has no choice but to open his mouth. Umadlik et patila, and they light a fire and they melt down a chunk of lead. They make burning liquid lead. Now the melting point of lead, I just had to look up, is 621 Fahrenheit, 327 Celsius. It's extremely hot. V'zorka l'toch piv. They pour the superheated lead into the mouth of the convict. V'yaredet l'toch me'av. It goes down into his guts. V'chomeret et b'nei me'av. And it burns up all of his insides. And here the Bartanura brings from the Gemara that the idea is that the execution of Sreifa is like the death of Nadav and Avihu, the Kohanic sons of Aaron, who went in and brought ketoret, brought incense without permission, and they were burned. It's called in the Gemara, Sreifa Neshama V'guf Kayam. So they're only burned inside, and the exterior body is actually intact. Rabbi Yehuda objects to the scarf practice around the neck. Afu imet, if he dies like this, biadam, by the witnesses pulling on these scarves, lo hi mekaymin b'mitzvot sreifa. They haven't done the actual procedure of death by burning. That's actually a chenek, and that's not appropriate here. Rather, they take these tongs. I've heard the dentists have tongs like this that force the jaw and the mouth open, and against his will. And they would light up, melt the lead, and pour the burning lead into his throat. And it would accomplish what it needs to accomplish, to burn the insides, leaving the outsides intact. Rabbi Elazar ben Sadok, he brings a story he heard. Maise, there was an event, Bevat Kohen Achat, a certain daughter of a Kohen, Shezinta, who committed adultery, and we'll see that's one of the crimes for which Sreifa is indicated. Hekifua Chavile Zmorot Usfrua. And what the court did was they surrounded her with bundles of dried branches and vines, and they lit her on fire externally. Amru Lo, the sages told him, Mipnei Shelo Haya Beit Din Shel Oteshah Baki. The court in that place and time was not Baki. They didn't know the halacha, and the Gemara elaborates, they were tzedukim. They were sages who had some learning, but the tzedukim took the verses literally. Sreifa is Sreifa, and they didn't learn out what the Torah was indicating and hinting and teaching us through the Torah Shabbal Pei, that it should really be an internal Sreifa, not external. So they made a mistake. On to Mishnah Gimel, Mitzvot HaNeherogin. What is hereg? Hereg is literally killing, but we'll see how this works. Hayu matizin et rosho b'sayif. They would remove his head through the means of a sword. Kederech shem malchut ose. Like the kings, the governments, meaning the Amorim, the Amorites, and the Romans were famous for doing. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he says, Nivel Huzay, that's a very disgraceful way to die. In the Gemara, they say the person killed this way has to be facing the executioner. It's very scary. Ele manichin et rosho ala sadon. So what do they do instead? They put his head down, face down, onto a block, v'kotzitz b'kofitz, and they use a large cleaver, a large axe, to cut the neck from the back. That way he does not see it coming. Amrulo, the other sages objected to Rabbi Yehuda. They say, Ein mita menuveled mizo. There's no more disgraceful way to die than this. And in the Gemara, they actually elaborate that Rabbi Yehuda would agree it's not very seemly. It is a disgraceful way to die, but he says that because the non-Jewish nations, like the Amorites and the Romans, used swords as their official method of execution, then Jews should not follow, because we have a halacha, b'chukotechem lo telechu. Don't follow what the non-Jews are doing and adopt that as your own practice. The sages say the Torah teaches us actually to use a sword and not an axe, so that's why they hold like this. Finally, the Mishnah adds mitzvot nehanokin. How about henek, strangulation? Hayumishokin into bezevel argvotav. They would put the convicted person who needed execution into this fertilizer, this mud, so they're stuck. And put a strong, hard rope or handkerchief within a soft one. The korich al tavaro, wrap it around the neck. Zeh moshech etzlo. One witness pulls towards him. Zeh moshech etzlo. The other from the other side pulls towards him. Ad she nafsho yotza, until this strangulation is completed and the soul departs the convict. Tizkul mitzvot, hatzlacha rabah.